Hello, and welcome to Empower Hour for Change Makers. I'm Lee Mitchell, the host, and this is Natalie Haynes. And together we are going to empower you to be the change in the world you wish to see and the change within yourself. Natalie, I'd love to have you just quickly introduce yourself and also introduce our topic, which is the stories we believe and embody in our professional lives.
Okay. Hi, Lee, and hi, everybody else. I'm Natalie Haynes, and I was thinking about this topic today and got really excited because it's a way to um, understand mental health and how that impacts our day-to-day lives. And find a way to include it. So I'm a psychotherapist. I also do consulting work. I'm a keynote speaker, and I teach people how to have conversations about race. So all these different ways that what I love to do is to help people to understand how knowing themselves and embodying who they are helps them to be in the world in a more present, engaged way. So, yeah.
I have to
And this
say that,
topic, yeah,
no, go
I was going
ahead.
to say this. Yeah, I was going to say when you and I talked about this specific topic, one of the things that had become a theme and still is a theme, I believe for many of us, is the stories that we tell ourselves when it comes to us engaging with, whether it's ourself, the world, the people around us. And when it comes to our professional lives, how do those stories that we tell ourselves impact our ability to connect with other people? And considering how important inclusion and feeling and having that felt sense of belonging in the workplace is so important. Um, I believe that, understanding and being able to slow down and understand what are those stories that we tell ourselves. I think that's I know it's just a really juicy topic, and I thought it would be really great to talk about that with you today. Or we thought it was going to be. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that we landed on this topic because I think that there are many times in our professional and personal lives where we don't feel like we belong. And when we don't feel like we belong, we start to really potentially say negative things to our internal voice, that voice that we, is telling us things about who we are and how the world perceives us. And I know that I get caught up a lot in that myself, as an
Mhm.
educator, as a woman, even as a parent and a friend. There oftentimes I'm thinking about what the other person is thinking about me, and also just at times just not really comfortable in my skin, and it can be really challenging. I see that we have two viewers who are live watching, so I'd love to have them leave a comment and talk to us about what this topic means to you. Are there times in your professional life where you assign meaning to something that maybe shouldn't be there? It's like sometimes a setback is just a setback. It doesn't have to mean anything about you personally. I gave the example when I was telling my students about it in class, is the example being that, you don't get that interview. What meaning do you assign to that setback?
Mhm.
Or, you're a business owner and you're trying to land a sale. How do you interpret that message, that internal message, that disappointment? You know, the whole idea is that we want to be more resilient and we want to be careful what we're saying to ourselves, because what we hear over and over again can become our reality. So, what do you think about what I've said there? How does that play into your thoughts as a psychotherapist and someone who is a speaker and also works in the diversity, inclusion, and belonging field?
Well, for me, when those examples that you gave were so great because I was thinking about it when I was thinking about talking about this today, one of the things that, I thought was like, this is a way to understand what anxiety is. Like sometimes when we think about, when somebody says that they feel anxious or they think about anxiety, it feels like, ooh, it's this big thing, and so I'd like to offer, a different definition of anxiety, that the definition that I use. I'm a Gestalt trained therapist, and so one of the definitions that I use is, anxiety is like a stopping of the breath. And
Mm.
so, it's like when we get anxious or we get nervous, we sort of, our breathing is shallow, because of what we imagine the future is going to be, right?
Mhm.
And so anxiety is sometimes, I believe, and how I see it, as it's like our body's way of being able to say, like, to be more as a friend as opposed to a foe,
Mhm.
right? To be more of a friend than an enemy, a part of you that's saying, hey, there's something about what's happening right now that you're getting pretty nervous about.
Mm.
So our discomfort is an opportunity to check inside. So when it comes to the stories that we tell ourselves, when we think about, whether it's we haven't heard back when it comes, from an email, or, a sale, or, we have a big project to work on, or we had a conversation with somebody and we're not quite sure about how that interaction went, we can assign a meaning to that unknown,
Mhm.
that it's like we don't necessarily know what somebody else may be thinking, what they may be doing, how come the reason that they haven't responded, haven't called us back, if we have to have a conversation, what they might say. So the unknown, that big unknown, is a place where we can add stories so that we can know, right?
Mhm.
It's like our anxiety is this imagined future.
Mhm.
And if we are not careful, we can put some stories into that space that aren't necessarily true. And that
Mhm.
may come from our history, where, from our our experiences, from our memories, from, the things we don't even remember,
Mhm.
how we see ourselves. So this understanding what anxiety is, or at least having you know an awareness of anxiety, that it's, maybe it's your body telling you something, or it's a a way to interpret, I might be seeing this future, this imagined future, in a way that
Mhm.
may not be true. So
Mhm.
if I think about these moments like stories, I always think, what's the story that I'm telling
Mhm.
myself? What's the story that I'm telling myself about why I haven't heard back from this person?
Mhm.
And if we're not aware, we may not necessarily know that it's just a thought that we're having that may not be true,
Mhm.
but it can feel true. So, you know, slowing down and understanding, what am I telling myself that right now, or what am I feeling right now, or what is this discomfort right now?
Mhm.
And being able to check inside and say, what am I believing about this moment? What am I telling myself about this moment? That's where we can interrupt these somewhat automatic, these automatic places that we can go,
Mhm.
you know. Yeah. Like
Oh,
Lee,
that
when you think about your professional, oh, I just interrupted you, but I was going to ask you a question. Like when you think about
please.
your, in your professional life, and I also believe this. Like I've also experienced this. Can you think of moments when, having a conversation with someone, and, noticing something in their, whether it's their facial expression or their body language, and automatically interpreting it like, oh, shoot, I'm not quite sure what they're thinking of me, or automatically I'm assuming that they are not happy with me, that sort of thing. Have you ever had that
Mhm.
experience?
Oh, 100%. I think because I had a fair bit of trauma as a child, I'm always looking at someone's eyes and trying to interpret, like, what is the meaning behind their facial expressions. My adopted father was an alcoholic, so it made interpreting, I couldn't just count on what words were being said. I was, like, looking at all those cues, right? Like, so many different cues, and trying to interpret what they meant, because if I wasn't on high alert, then what would end up happening is I would be sideswiped, right? With
Right.
setting the him off as a child,
Mm.
and it was really difficult for me to cope with. So my way of being able to protect myself was to ensure that I was always trying to pick up on every cue and prepare myself for that in advance so that I could avoid conflict. Because the times when I didn't avoid conflict, all of a sudden I'd be in a situation where I didn't even know how I got into it, right? Which was really challenging. Um, so so yeah, absolutely. And I think that because of my childhood experience with that, it has definitely carried over into my professional lives. It's carried over into my relationships with my spouse, where I'm reading into things based off of the tone of the voice, the facial expression, the lack of a smile, that sort of thing. And then I
Mhm.
start to really think a lot of negative things, sometimes about myself, sometimes about the person that I'm dealing with, right? So absolutely, and it's something that through mindfulness I'm trying to get a better handle on, and realize
Yeah.
that those are old coping mechanisms that are no longer required in my life. We
Mhm.
have uh, Dehandra, who has just joined us. He's a leadership coach, and he just left a nice comment for us. Feel free to ask a question on this topic if we can answer anything for you. Uh, Happy to support you and anyone else that decides to pop in our conversation today.
So,
Feel
oops, sorry. I was looking at my, yeah. So you know, when you were talking about that, one of the things that was very interesting, is that is such a human, that is a human response.
Mhm,
Like each one of us has, every single human responds in this way, because one, our bodies are always trying to keep us safe. Our brains are wired to keep us safe, and they're also wired for connection.
mhm,
So we have a part of us that is that, it's innate to us to want to connect.
mhm,
And when we have when we're in an environment where that's not always, it's not, who we are isn't supported, or there is something that's in the environment that is, as you shared, there was
mhm,
alcoholism or whatever it might be, we will adjust ourselves automatically and unconsciously. We will adjust ourselves in order to be connected. So that's how we end up as like people pleasers, and or we are scanning the environment for, a potential threat. And so that automatic response will happen because it's like, the best example, the metaphor that I love to use is we don't touch a hot stove twice. So
mm,
if we got burned, when we walk by a stove again and we feel a little bit of the heat, we'll just shrink back.
mhm,
And so the ability, as you were sharing with mindfulness and your awareness of like decoupling, what's the thought that I'm having about this moment? What is the meaning that I'm making about it, from like taking that apart from the automatic reaction
Mhm.
is a way to interrupt and create a new way of being with the person who's in front of you.
Mhm.
So but it starts with the awareness of yourself, and it starts with,
Yeah.
with the awareness of like, oh, I notice that I'm getting really nervous, or I notice that I'm thinking all of these things, or I notice that I'm imagining this person is thinking XYZ about me,
Mhm.
or I notice that I'm telling myself I'm hesitating from sending this email because I'm imagining that this person is going to, you know um, read it in a specific way that, would be detrimental. So
Mhm.
any kind of work around, when it comes to personal change and empowering ourselves
Mhm.
really starts with um, getting curious about yourself and really
Mhm.
noticing what you're experiencing in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the best place to start.
So, yeah, it's just almost reacquainting myself with some grounding, like, looking around the room and looking for things that are in the here and now, the present. That is a good way to sort of remind it. Maybe you can tell me as as a therapist, is that a good way of reminding myself that I am in the present moment and that the techniques or the auto responses that are in me are no longer needed?
A thousand percent.
Mhm.
So, if um, the in one of my workshops, I use this example of, like imagine yourself standing on the edge of a cliff.
Mm.
So if you imagine, like, imagine yourself and whoever may be listening, imagine that you're standing on the edge of a cliff and there's no guardrail, there's nothing,
Mhm.
and just notice what happens to you. Like, just
Mm.
scan your body and notice.
Yeah, I can feel myself feeling edgy.
Yeah. Yeah. My hands already have, like, started sweating, like,
Yeah,
already sweating. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
a
and
little
I'm
nervous
afraid of
about it.
heights too, so that
Yeah,
also
me too.
yeah, and actually a flashback of a memory came to me of being at the side of a road in a situation where I was sick, throwing up. Something so, like, a bad memory came into play too, which is interesting.
Yeah. So even though we are not there, right? So even as you think of that memory, right?
Mhm,
Um, we will automatically have we have physical responses, but all we're doing is thinking of being at the edge of a cliff, or you're thinking about that specific memory on the side of the road.
mhm,
So even though we are having a thought that isn't currently happening in this moment, our bodies will respond. Like, we will have physiological responses. We will have
mhm,
emotional responses. And we may
mhm,
not necessarily be aware that we are having this response unless we decide to check in. Like, we can think of standing on the edge of a cliff, but once we actually check in, then I notice that my hands are kind of, my palms got sweaty.
mhm,
So if you imagine now moving that to the workplace, or professional lives, and if I'm like, I used to be pretty insecure before I was a therapist, I worked in a corporation. I worked at Canadian Tire, so hi to all my old Canadian Tire peeps. And
mhm,
being in a meeting, especially when I was new to a team, was intimidating.
mhm,
So, the thought that I had that I wouldn't be able to share what I needed to share, or I wasn't going to say the right thing, or I was going to be seen in a negative way, showed up
mhm,
automatically. So
mhm,
imagine if we have a thought, we will physically, emotionally, and somatically respond to that thought that we are having about ourselves and about the other person. So
mm,
just like the example with standing on the edge of a cliff, like if you take that to every single thought that you have, you got to know if it's true, or you have to place the thought there that you really want to have, you know, because if not, we may be creating a way of being that isn't
Mhm.
what we really want. You know what I mean? Like, we may be
Mhm.
showing up in a meeting and already imagining ourselves to be not accepted, or we
Yeah.
may be presenting um, facilitating a workshop, or making a presentation and presenting it in a way where it matches that thought that we have of ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that, like, I really believe in, in being with your feelings and knowing what you're experiencing in your body. I feel like that is a way through to understanding this, but also being an
Mhm.
observer of what are the thoughts that I'm thinking, you know,
Mhm.
and that's, that awareness alone and being able to question, is that actually true? That gives us a way to interrupt this automatic response that happens, you know? And so, um, yeah, I just feel like it's so empowering, because it's like we get to, it's empowering and it can be a little scary. It's empowering
Yeah.
in the sense that, right? Like, it's empowering in the sense that, like, if I know that I have placed a thought in my head about,
Mhm.
an email that I haven't heard from someone,
Mm.
if I know I'm going to respond in a specific way because I haven't heard back from someone,
Mhm.
that first the first thing is, it lets me know, that might not actually be true. I have no idea. And so I'm just going to assume that, maybe they haven't read it, or, maybe they've been busy, or they've been back to back in meetings, like whatever that might be, you know. So
Mhm.
just so however, the scary part is, and I believe this to be true for all of us when it comes to, dealing with anxiety, is, how do I be in the unknown? Right? Like, if anxiety is about this imagined future, and, like, I don't know what is going to come next, right?
Mhm.
Because for many of us, it's really scary to be in the unknown.
Mhm.
We fill it with the stories. So without the stories to support us sometimes, without, if we were just to say, like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen when I go into the meeting, that's kind of scary,
Mhm.
because then
Mhm.
we have to actually be in the present moment. And, it's, for a lot of people, that can be hard, right? We control situations, we control the things in our lives in order to not feel scared. But if we take away those controls, if we say, I'm just going to send this note and not, and have no idea about what's going to come, and I'm not going to think that they're thinking anything of me, it's like, okay, well, now what? What might come back, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, do you know what I mean? Like, it's taking away the stories that we've told ourselves, or imagining that I don't know what that person's thinking about me until I ask and find out, or I don't know why I have this person hasn't responded to my email. If I
Mhm.
take the story I've told myself, if I take that away, what I'm left with is just me and the unknown, you know?
Mm.
Yeah. And
Mm.
if we haven't in our lives been supported to be in that unknown place, we haven't developed that muscle, we will do what we like, we can easily work to avoid it. We can easily and
Yeah.
unconsciously avoid it, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not easy, but you can strengthen that muscle. I really do believe that, and I can see it in myself. I can see that change, discipline change that I'm trying to bring into my life, because it's not serving the person that I'm thinking about, and and certainly not serving me well to interpret. And so what I there's a few things that I always tell people about this bit of advice, and that is, what people think about you is none of your business,
Mhm.
And the other thing is that you have, I don't know if you're familiar with Katie Byron's work.
Yeah.
Uh,
Byron
yeah,
Katie.
or pardon me,
Yeah.
Byron Katie.
Yeah.
Yes, I got mixed up. Byron Katie has a series of questions that she asks us to think about when we're in a communication challenge, and that is, and I'm going to hopefully remember all of them. So if I don't, maybe you might remember them. But the first one is one of them, at least, is what proof do I have?
Yeah.
And then the
Yeah.
next, yeah, and then the next thing is
Is it
this
true or
serving
is it
me?
really
Is
true?
it true?
Yeah.
And if it is true, is it serving me well?
Mhm.
And when I remember that in the heat of a moment, it really can help diffuse my emotions. And also, just because I think something is true, where's the proof? Right? And
Yeah.
especially if it's something negative about myself, right? And then, taking that step further to say, okay, maybe it is true, but is obsessing over this going to benefit me in any way, right? I
Mm.
think that's also really important to think about. We have Nicole Harinko, who has joined us as well. And Nicole is an incredible professional, marketing executive, and she is looking for new opportunities. So I know that she's listening probably with the uh, idea of, like, how can she continue to, keep her confidence up, around her job search, right? We know that she's going to land an incredible job, and it's important that she's particular about these opportunities that she is considering. And so she has two questions. Uh, so in context to work. So are there any mindfulness practices that can be easily integrated into a work routine to help maintenance, so that you're not so affected by the moment when you encounter stress,
Mhm.
for a leader or manager? And how can managers support their teams in maintaining good mental health? So some really good
Those are good questions.
thoughts there.
Yeah. So, I'm a Gestalt therapist. However, there's definitely it's very similar to mindfulness. So I'm going to give you, some of the like the practices or the things that I've done. I was wondering, yeah.
Okay.
So I've done a lot of work. I've done a lot of training around somatic psychotherapy. So somatic psychotherapy it's a way of, understanding yourself by checking in and seeing, like, how, noticing how your body is moving, and how your body is, how you actually move in the world, and how that relates to how you've developed from a from a therapeutic perspective, or a psychological perspective.
Mhm.
So one of the pieces about, somatic therapy and Gestalt therapy is awareness of what you're experiencing in the present. And
Mhm.
so we have a million thoughts that are going by in a moment. We are taking in the environment, and there's so many bits and millions of bits of information that we're taking in a moment. And we are also responding in the moment, from an emotional perspective, from a physical perspective. And when it comes to stress, expanding what we are aware of can be so useful. Um, so when it comes to stress, as an example, stress is the difference between what is and what I and how I imagine things are, or so when it comes to addressing stress, the best place, and really the one strategy that not well one
Mhm.
strategy that can work, at least for here, is to drop into the present moment. So what that
Mhm.
means is, for me, so I'm going to give you all a little experiment that you can try right now. So let's say, for example, like I work and, you know, I'm stressed about something, or I'm imagining I have a meeting coming up and I'm, you know, getting nervous. So what I would do is actually feel like, so put your feet on the ground
Mm-hmm. Okay.
and feel yourself. So put your feet on the ground and feel your back against the chair. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And just notice where your feet and the ground meet. Like, feel the sensation of your feet and the ground.
Mm.
And feel the sensation of your chair and your back and where they meet. And just do a scan of what you're experiencing in your body. Now, maybe because I'm on a live right now, and this is, you know, one of my first ones doing this, I have a little, like, I can feel a little like movement in the middle of my stomach, you know, and
Mm.
I can feel that I have a little bit of a tightness, but I've also felt that it's changed, you know, in our time together.
Mm.
And so one of the things that this does, and so just notice what this feels like as you just bring your awareness to your feet.
Yeah, I can feel I feel a little cold because I don't have the heat on. But my feet feel a bit tingly.
Yeah. So did you feel yourself drop out of your head?
Yes, actually.
Yeah.
It's interesting though. I think because this is my third round of doing these live streams, I'm way calmer than I
Uh-huh.
was on the first one. And this, you know, each time I feel a little bit calmer. So I think practice is really important
Yeah.
in our day-to-day lives,
So
right?
practicing this is really
Yes.
important.
Yes,
So then
absolutely.
the next thing, so really it's like, how do I be in this moment rather than at the moment that I imagine is actually happening?
Mhm.
You know, so what I'll do is, and it was Nicole that answered the question, so this is just a little thing, but I'll, you know, if I'm writing something, I bring my awareness to how it feels to hold my pen, or I bring my awareness to exactly what I'm doing in the moment. Maybe I'm writing something, or maybe I'm typing something, but I allow myself to observe, when am I moving to my head and the thoughts that I might be having,
Mhm.
and see if I can, you know, hold on to the desk and feel what it feels like to be in the desk, to be with, like, in this specific moment. And using your senses can allow you to actually, you know, bring yourself to the moment. Because in truth, it's the only thing that's actually happening right now,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Mhm.
whatever we imagine is going to happen, you know, if I'm all of a sudden, you know, I was this morning, I was writing out all the things that I had to do, and all of a sudden I could feel my breath, like my breath stopping. And I went, wait a second, I'm fine. Like, there's nothing really here to worry about. But I had gone to a place where I'm not going to have enough time. And that, right?
Yeah,
And
I
that,
felt it before our live. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
And so automatically we go to this place where, you know, we're rushing and we feel like it's not, and we're out of our body and we're in our heads and we're in a scary place. And
Mhm.
we are responding physically to that thought that we are having.
Mhm.
So I was like, no, I'm just going to go and feel myself feel my feet walking on the ground, you know, hold my pen, you know, really allow myself to be in the moment and what I'm doing.
Mhm.
And if we bring our focus to the moment, and from a physical perspective, or like a tangible perspective, like, feel the desk that you're working on, or the chair that you're sitting on, like, that really does help. And notice then what happens. Your breathing
Mhm.
stops because you're not afraid of that scary imagined future, right? It's the
Yeah.
imagination, it's the imagined future. And that's what Katie's talking about.
Mhm.
She's like, is that actually true? It's like, no. Are we actually standing on the edge of a cliff? No. But our bodies are going to tell us that it is.
Yes. Yeah.
But, like, our brains aren't attached to the outside world. So if you put a thought into it, oh, that's kind. Our brains aren't attached to the outside world. So if you put a thought in there, your body is going to respond. It's just a computer, our brains. So you really have to be aware of what are the things that you're thinking, because you will walk through the world with that image. You will walk into a meeting automatically assuming that you won't be seen. And it's not to say that that doesn't happen. It's
Mhm.
not, you know what I mean? Like there's this
Mhm.
distinction, but really just bringing some awareness around what am I telling myself and how do I know if this is true? And
Mhm.
sometimes I don't. And so, if I really, and this is me, I'm not telling anyone to do this, but if there's a person or if there's a person that I do feel safe with, I might ask them, how did I come across to you? You know,
Mhm.
did I impact you in a way? It seemed like, you seemed a bit short. Did I impact you in a way? Have I done something?
I like that.
And
Did I impact you in a yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Asking a clarifying question.
ask a clarifying question, because then I can
Mhm.
actually check out have I impacted this person? Because maybe I did.
Mhm.
And I'm totally willing to take accountability for it and whatever it may be. However, there's been a lot of times where I've done that and I haven't. I just read their facial expression
Mm.
in a way that it reminded me of something from my history, my past, that I pasted onto them and automatically imagined that this person felt XYZ about me and they didn't.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
imagine how I showed up in those conversations, or you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
so our awareness of our own self and how we are relating to our environment is essential.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that you mentioned that because the thing is also someone could be having a expression that looks like they're angry, but it doesn't mean that it's about you. Like,
Right. Yeah.
I know my husband tells me that, like, just because I look stern or cross, it's not it don't interpret so pretty much every time we have a conversation and he's irritated, he's like, "This request or this feeling isn't directed to you to solve or for
Yeah.
you to feel. It's not, it's just a statement and it's, I just need to get it out there and I don't need you to internalize it to think that somehow it's related to you." Right?
Right.
So I try to learn that over time. One thing that I've been taking on with my therapist, and this is very work related, right? Is that
Yeah. People can't
I
handle it the rest
feel
of the
like
day.
I talk too much, especially when I'm nervous. And I know you and I have talked about that. And I've apologized to you when I feel like I'm just like blurting out every message that's in my head,
Yeah.
sometimes stress oriented, or sometimes because I'm overly excited. And so the neat visualization she gives me is she says, like, think about your thoughts on a clothesline, right? And
Mhm.
try to pick one item off the clothesline and think about that one message that you want. Like, what is the most important message that you want to share, as opposed
Right.
to feeling like you have to get in everything that's on your mind, right? You can save it for later. They don't all have to come out at once so that you sound, rushed in trying to like get everything. It's like you're trying to like puke out all everything that's on your mind. And usually it comes from a good place, which is a good thing, but breaks down, it makes the conversation confusing if you try to go into too many topics,
Area.
right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
too many areas. So it's like focus on one thing and then introduce it if you know that you have the time for it.
Yeah. And
So
yeah. Well, I was going to say that,
mhm,
like the, when you said that, it reminded me of the interesting thing about that when you're feeling it and you're reflecting on it, right?
mhm,
And so if you were to ask yourself, not to answer here, but if you were to say, and everybody, like if you were to answer like, how am I doing that? I notice that I'm doing this, and I'm noticing that there's something about it that feels uncomfortable and I'm not sure what. And so you're exploring this.
mhm,
And so if you were to think about it like, well, what's important about me doing that? And I'll use an
mhm,
example from my own experience. I would do the same. I'd be like, "Blah," and share all this stuff. And I remember once I was in, when I was doing my training, but I was in a group therapy group for a while. And the, the facilitator, her name's Michelle DeRoche, she's amazing. She asked, what are you doing that for? Like, what is it? And it was the question of like, what's important about that? Like, what's necessary about giving all the details? Right. So it's not about making ourselves good or bad or right or wrong, because sometimes it's like, I'm afraid the other person won't understand me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm afraid, I'm not going to be clear. I'm afraid they're going to be upset at something else, like, because I haven't shared all of the information. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, I, rem- I think that's where it's like, oh, well, if that's the thing that I'm nervous about, then that's maybe a story that I'm telling myself. I could check in with the person and say, am I being cleared? Have you understood what I've shared? Because you may not need to share all the other details.
That's right. Yeah. Take a
Yeah.
moment to ask and then wait, and then if more explanation is needed, then you can go into it. But sometimes it's not. And so
No.
you have to learn to say, okay, I can stop now. Yay, my point got
Yeah.
across. Woohoo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh yeah. So there were two other things that I briefly want to touch on. And that is one, imposter syndrome. So last week we talked about embracing our skills and being aware that imposter syndrome is not something that we should see in a negative light, because honestly, we're all a work in progress and we all have the ability to learn and grow. And so we're not imposters. We're lifelong learners, right? So we may not feel like we completely belong, but there, first of all, there's no proof of that, and second of all, we can tell ourselves, I'm
Mhm.
learning and I'm growing. And so this is a good thing, right? So it's natural to feel a little uncomfortable because I don't know everything. I'm not an expert. And rarely, no one generally likes to be called an expert because it's like living a label that you maybe feel is,
Yeah.
it's like a movie star who's like worried about doing the next movie or the next book because what if it isn't as good as the first one?
Right. 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 Yeah. It's like,
So
yeah, you're good at all the things automatically. Like that's your standard. Like that's the yeah.
yeah, so there is a strong case to reframe imposter syndrome as it's a learning syndrome, or it's a learning, I don't like to call it a syndrome, right? It's like we're learning and we're growing and we're evolving in the moment. So
Yeah.
what do we tell what are some techniques to tell ourselves those stories that we're telling and the meaning that we're applying to imposter syndrome or a lack of confidence?
Well, um, so when it comes to imposter syndrome, um, I think it is related to like how you see yourself as an imposter is something to explore, right?
Mhm.
Like, and so, if you don't feel confident, what is what is it about, like what isn't making you feel confident, I think is a question to ask. Like what is it
Okay.
about you that makes you not feel confident? What are you telling yourself about who you are that makes you describe yourself as an imposter?
Mhm.
Because if the story is, I went to a networking event and I wasn't able to, just walk up to everyone and talk to people, what is the reason for that? And like what made it difficult for me to do that? So, what I want to like offer is using yourself as like questioning what makes me believe this? Where did I get this story from? And is it true?
Mm.
Because if we right, and I'm not saying that people won't people I'm not saying that we may walk into a room and someone doesn't see us for who we are because of, the different elements of identity, race, gender, da 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 da, whatever it may be. So I'm not saying that that isn't true. Like, that happens, right? However, there's the environment and then there's us. Like, and how we relate to that environment is really important for us to explore, each one of us, because we cannot be separated from the environment. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
I'm showing up in this way with you, and you're showing up in this way with me because we've had experiences together, right? And so, if we were brand new to each other, if we just met for the first time and this is alive, this may be a completely different conversation, right?
Mhm.
So, how we relate to the environment is really important. So, if I have grown up being told that I'm not enough, I'm not saying that's true, but if I've been told that, or I have interpreted and defined myself based on how I've, grown up and what my environment has told me, I may walk around with that story and not even really be aware that I am.
Mm.
So that's why it's important, if you're calling yourself an imposter, what makes you believe that? Is it
Hmm.
because you're seeing other people and they seem to, have a be able to engage with each other,
Mhm.
or, don't seem nervous, or, do you call yourself an imposter because you see someone get up and have be able to facilitate a workshop or do a presentation or do a keynote speech, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not that, so I'm an imposter because I'm just pretending,
Mhm.
or
Comparing ourselves to other people is a big way to get imposter syndrome,
totally,
uh,
totally.
ramping up its control over you.
Yeah. And so that is this based identifying the story? Um, well, let me finish this and then I can answer that question.
Mhm.
Um, so, so there's a many ways to think about imposter syndrome, but how you think about it, how it shows up for you, and what's the context around which you believe that, I think is important,
Okay.
right? Because if I walk into, the very first networking meeting I walked into, I was terrified. But if I walked into that and thought, well, everyone else looks like they know what they're doing and I should also, I will feel like I will pretend and I will feel like I'm an imposter. Someone's going to find out that I don't know anything. But if I include the context of this is my first time and I've never done this before, so I'm going to be new at it, then and not really know, then I'm not an imposter. I'm just new at, networking.
Or I'm
Right,
new
and
to this environment, or I'm
yeah,
unfamiliar with this situation. Or it could be that you had an off day, you didn't sleep well,
exactly.
you maybe didn't prepare the way you normally would. So it shouldn't be that you apply a blanket feeling about yourself. It could be just that particular day
Yeah,
in that
exactly.
particular scenario. So
Right.
reminding ourselves to check in to the always thoughts that we have. I'm
Yeah,
always this way, or this, I'm never
or the
good, or those
yeah,
those real blanket statements that keep us down. I think
yeah.
that's something that we should really be aware of. And then the last question I have is, and then we'll go back to Nicole's question, is if I'm looking for a new opportunity and I'm feeling really vulnerable, what could I do to help me? So that goes to our first podcast episode,
Mhm.
recovering from job loss.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
sometimes we rush into trying to get the next thing right away because we want to validate who we are as people. I know I did that when the latest thing that I was doing didn't work out. I felt like I had to run out and do something immediately so that I could repair myself instead of just
Mhm.
maybe sitting with it for a little bit and allowing myself to recover from the experience that I had before feeling the urgency to move on to the next thing.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's true. I've worked, with lots of people that in this similar situations, and I've had experienced it myself.
Sure.
Um, and so I believe, okay, our being able to be with what is, being able to be in the moment in this scenario is actually grieving what was lost. And grieving, maybe how we saw ourselves, how we moved in the world, how did I define myself? Like, does this mean because that change in our life it's big because I mean, we're work longer than we are at home sometimes, right? In a day. And so how we see ourselves is in relation to that, right? That aspect of identity. And so when we lose that, or when someone says, you're not like, depending on how that job is lost, like
Mhm.
whatever it may be, you know, being able to grieve it and being able to feel whatever feelings that emerge because they naturally will, that will give us the ability to have a new sense of ourself. Like it will, right? But I mean, I think contending with, what does this mean about me? Who am I without this? Like that, I think that's an important process to go through. Because if we don't, we can urgently, like you shared, try to jump into the next thing
Mhm.
and to fix it, to not feel, what
Yeah.
hurts
Yeah.
and, avoid the discomfort. But I think actually allowing yourself to process it in whatever way that is, allows you to get a sense of yourself.
Yeah.
And meaning like, did I actually like that? You know, did I like that role? Did I like that job? Is that how I wanted to live my life? Or, maybe there was a way in which I was showing up that I'm not aligned with anymore.
Right.
Like whatever it may be is going to be unique to each individual, but I think allowing yourself to actually say like, feeling what happened. And what the truth is that processing feelings can take time. Processing the experiences of our life, sometimes it takes time. But
Mhm.
I'll tell you something, it is worth it. It's worth it.
Yeah, because then
Worth
eventually,
it.
if you don't process it, it's gonna come up later.
Yeah, in another
Right.
way, in another
Yeah.
form,
Mhm.
all of a
It
sudden you're
becomes
jumping it.
unresolved.
It becomes unresolved. It's like like unfinished. It's unfinished business. That's what
Yeah.
we call it in Gestalt.
Yeah.
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 Hmm.
I like that. That's a good term. So now
Yeah.
maybe we can just briefly look at Nicole's topic, which was she was just wanting to know if a lot of this is based in CBT, so cognitive behavioral
Behavioral
therapy,
therapy.
in identifying the story, questioning if it's true, and then revising the story to be based in fact so that you can counter the pattern and revise the story and then overcome and rewire your thoughts. Great
Um,
observations, Nicole.
yeah. So I think a lot of therapies are very like they're similar and different, right? So there's so much crossover. Um, so no, it's not specifically. I haven't studied trained in CBT. I'm just trained in Gestalt therapy. The I think like CBT now has MCBT, which is like a mindfulness, so it's including what you're thinking. Um, Gestalt therapy. So when I say that they're very similar, a lot of therapies will do this. They just may have a different approach. So Gestalt therapy is it's a phenomenological approach, which just means uh, we use ourself as the learning tool. So if I want to learn about imposter syndrome, I'm not going to read a definition about it. I'm going to see how does it show up within me. So in
Mm,
relation to Nicole's, like what does it mean for me? How do I feel like an imposter? I'm going to have one experience, you're going to have another experience, but somewhere there's going to be a similarity around like not feeling my full self in a moment.
mhm,
So I would say one of the differences, I'm not going to say it's one of the differences, but in relation to what Nicole's sharing, if I if I notice what I'm experiencing and what I'm feeling, and
Mhm.
I can, and I know, and I feel the sense of this is a story that I don't actually know is true. That information is in my body. So we would come to know that from a Gestalt perspective, from an, ex- in an, we would come to know that in an experiential way, right? And if I checked in with someone, if I checked in with you and said, "Do you think that about me?" Then I would also have another experience that would tell me that that wasn't true. Um, I'm giving you such a quick
No, that's good.
explanation of Gestalt, but
Yeah.
it's really working at being aware of what you're thinking, feeling, and how you're relating to yourself and the environment. So
Right.
the person in front of you and what's happening in the space between. So yeah, it's Gestalt is a sort of a different way. It's not so cognitive. It's not about just noticing your thoughts. It's also about noticing what you're experiencing. So yeah, hopefully
That's
that
what I
helps.
really
Yeah,
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 it definitely helped me to identify. I like the fact that you focus on the now, right? Because
yeah.
it just I feel like it's a faster way of healing in a way. Like, of course, you have to the feelings come up from that are probably an old record or an old tape or an old memory, but what how can I get into the present moment and go, "Okay, well, I'm not that 14-year-old girl that was really struggling in school. I'm this amazing person who's an instructor and owns a company and does all these great things." So, while it's natural that we may go to a past version of ourselves, probably activated by, a lot of trauma that you might have or poor experiences that you had growing up while you were in those formative years,
Mhm,
but you will remind yourself that you are who you are now, and
mhm.
you have so many tools that you didn't have in the past. So
Yeah,
thank you for answering these questions and for having this wonderful conversation with
yeah, it was
us,
fun.
about embodying, our what meaning we assign to what beliefs that we assign to the conversations that we have with ourselves and with what experiences come, based off of situations that are beyond our control, or even in our control. So thank you so much for diving into this topic. So each week at the end of our time together, I always ask that you give us 3 to 5 things that we can put into action, even in the next week. So, what are some things that we can do, 3 to 5 things that we can do on this topic to help ourselves not take on those negative feelings about ourselves and the negative embodiment that we have?
Um, so I would start with one, remember that your brain isn't attached to the outside world. So what you are thinking, it's just
Mhm.
it's like you said, the clothesline. There is the stream of thoughts that we are having are going to be related to what the information that we're taking in. For me, remembering that I am going to respond to the thought I'm having, to the story that I'm telling myself that may not necessarily be actually true,
Yep.
helps me in the moment because I can send that email, or I can, because I have, and I'll tell myself, I don't know what they're going to say. I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know what they're thinking. So I'm going to act as if. The next piece is, like I was sharing, use your present physical surroundings, like what you're actually experiencing, use the floor as support, like bring your awareness there. If you feel yourself feeling very stressed, like touch like I actually like touch a counter or touch my
Hmm,
desk. I'll
I
hold
do
a pen.
this.
Yeah.
Like if I'm not somewhere where someone would be like, why the hell is she doing touching her face like that? But this is supposed to, like, doing this is supposed to calm your nervous system down.
Yes, feel how comforting it is.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
So
like I'm
that's what
comforting
I
myself.
so I so for the podcast, I'm putting my hand on my cheek and I'm just
Oh,
holding it close. So that helps
yeah,
to calm my nervous system down.
yeah. Because you can feel well, my hand's always cold, but you can feel like I can feel my hand supporting my face, right? And I can feel the coolness of my hand that sort of awakens me a little bit to what's
Mhm,
happening in the present. So, using our sensations to bring us to the present moment can be so useful because it can take us out of our head, right? It can take us out of the thoughts that we're thinking that are just a stream sometimes.
mhm,
And then the third thing is ask yourself, like, ask yourself how or what. What am I thinking? What is the reason I'm thinking about this? And how am I responding? So
mhm,
if I notice how I'm responding, if I notice that I'm uncomfortable, I
mhm.
will ask myself, what is making me uncomfortable right now? And then the story will come.
Okay.
And so if I'm like, what's making me nervous about, joining the live as an example, the thought might be, I want to do a good job. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I trip over my words? What if I don't explain myself properly? Like those would be my natural go-tos of what may happen, And I
Mhm.
was like, forget it. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just going to go. And this was wonderful, So
Yeah.
what or how? What is making me experience this, or how am I experiencing this, and what is the reason? But why? I don't always like that question because it's like there's going to be this one answer. There's never one answer, and each one of us will have a unique answer based on who we are and our experiences and how we have related to the world. So knowing our so it's so use yourself. Get curious about yourself in the moment when you feel uncomfortable, because that discomfort will lead you to yourself.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
Well, what a beautiful session this has been, and great for Mental Health Month. So, and just great for our professional lives. So, thank you
yeah.
so much. It's been
Thank you for
incredible.
having me.
Oh, it's been great. And we are going to be talking about brave leadership with Carol Schulte
Mhm.
next
Oh,
week.
I love her.
Yes, yes. So I hope you'll join us.
Yes.
Yeah. So thanks to our listeners, and do continue to leave comments in the chat because we can always come back and answer questions. I know you'll probably go back and take a look at the comments and respond to things, and I will too. So if you want to join us in the after party at your convenience, you can do that too. Thanks so much, everyone. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.